I want you to imagine, just for a moment, being completely immersed in a live sporting event.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Picture yourself sitting in the sprawling stands of a colossal stadium, surrounded by, over 42,000 screaming fans.
That is a lot of noise.
It is. The crisp winter air is biting, but you hardly even notice it because the tension on the field is just so thick.
Right.
So incredibly heavy that the actual game unfolding on the grass in front of you suddenly becomes, well, entirely secondary.
Yeah, it sounds being about the score.
Exactly. It stops being about points on a scoreboard. It transforms right before your eyes into a boiling physical vendetta.
Yeah, a real clash.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are exploring one of the most infamous, chaotic spectacles in the history of Australian rules football.
The line in the sand, Matt.
The line in the sand. We're examining the 2004 clash between two fierce rivals, the Hawthorn Hawks and the Essendon Bombers. And whether you follow the sport religiously or you're just someone fascinated by the psychology of sports rivalries and enforcer culture.
And there's a lot of psychology there.
Oh, tons. This deep dive into the Hawthorn versus Essendon brawl will leave you with plenty of aha moments. It's going to leave you completely captivated.
It truly is a remarkable case study in how pressure and pride can completely short-circuit professional discipline.
Absolutely.
Our primary source for this session is a highly detailed historical breakdown of this Round 11 match, which took place at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Commonly known as the MCG.
Right, the MCG, on June 5th, 2004. And for those who aren't familiar, the MCG is a legendary stadium, just a true coliseum of world sports.
Massive venue.
The goal of our deep dives today is to really examine how a surprisingly lopsided, seemingly standard footy match spiraled entirely out of control into a sprawling 5-minute street fight.
Involving almost every player on the ground.
Yeah, almost every one. But we also want to look at the severe ripple effects this single violent afternoon had on both of these organizations for the next decade.
Okay, let's unpack this by stepping back in time a little bit. Because to understand why things exploded so violently in 2004, we have to look at the bad blood that had been simmering for a really long time.
Oh, it was a long time.
How far back does this animosity actually go?
Well, you have to rewind to the 1980s to find the real roots of this hostility.
The 80s.
During that decade, the Hawthorn Football Club was experiencing an absolute golden era. To give you a sense of their dominance in what was then the VFL.
The Victorian Football League, right?
Exactly. The VFL, which later expanded into the national AFL we know today, Hawthorn made every single grand final from 1983 to 1989.
Wow.
And then again in 1991.
Making a championship game 7 years in a row is, that's an absurd level of sustained excellence in any sport.
It really is unparalleled. They won 5 premierships, which is the Australian rules term for winning the championship title in that specific window.
Incredible.
But here is the crucial sticking point for our story today. They came up against Essendon 3 times during that incredible run.
Ah, okay. In 83, 84, and 85, right?
You got it.
Hawthorn took the first one, but then what happened in those next two?
Well, Essendon delivered these stinging back-to-back grand final victories over Hawthorn in 1984 and 1985.
Ouch.
Yeah. And the style of play back in that era is a vital piece of context here. Throughout the 1980s, the sport was incredibly raw. Players wore very little padding, if any at all.
Just brutal.
And both of these clubs played a bruising, attacking brand of football. It was an era where biffs, bumps, and outright physical brawls were just a regular, almost expected feature when these two teams met.
Just part of the game.
Exactly. That historical context established a deep-seated baseline of physical intimidation and, frankly, mutual disrespect between the two clubs.
So there's this lingering shadow of 1980s brutality hanging over them. But let's jump forward to the lead-up to this specific match on June 5, 2004.
Right.
The dynamic between the two clubs had shifted drastically by then, hadn't it?
Completely flipped. Moving into the 1990s and the early 2000s, Essendon had essentially become the bullies of the competition.
They were the top dogs.
Yeah, they won premierships in 1993 and 2000, and they had built a staggeringly dominant record over Hawthorn.
How dominant are we talking?
Well, going into round 11 of the 2004 season, Essendon had won 9 of the previous 10 meetings between the two clubs.
9 out of 10.
And they weren't just edging them out in close games. They were crushing Hawthorn by an average margin of 39 points per game.
Man. To put that into perspective for anyone new to the sport, a 39-point average margin means Essendon was basically treating Hawthorn like a training drill.
Very much.
They were completely outclassing them.
And the league standings reflected that reality. In Australian rules football, the standings are referred to as the ladder. Going into this match, Essendon was a top 4 contender sitting near the very top of the ladder with a 7-3 win-loss record.
They were heavy, undeniable favorites.
Undeniable. Hawthorn, on the other hand, was sitting at the absolute bottom of the ladder. They had only managed 2 paltry wins for the entire season up to that point.
Oof. So you have a proud club, Hawthorn, being consistently battered on the scoreboard, facing a team that has physically and mentally intimidated them for a solid decade.
They are the clear underdogs.
Which brings us to halftime of the 2004 match. Essendon is leading comfortably. The Hawthorn players trudge down into the locker room, exhausted and losing yet again. What exactly happened down there to change the entire trajectory of the afternoon?
This is where verified history and locker room mythology kind of intersect. Hawthorn had a club director named Dermot Brereton.
Okay.
Now, Brereton was not just a suit. He was a star player, an absolute legend for the Hawks during those brutal 1980s clashes we just talked about.
Oh, he knows the history firsthand.
Oh, deeply. He was known for his toughness.
Yeah.
So Brereton decides to address the players in the locker room. It was widely reported that he specifically directed the players to, quote, draw a line in the sand, end quote, and take a physical stand against the Bombers.
Basically telling them to stop acting like victims and fight back.
That was the unmistakable message. Now, Brereton later denied using the exact phrase, draw a line in the sand, but he fully admitted to advising the senior players to not stand for any physical intimidation that Essendon might try to impose on them in the second half.
He admitted that.
Yes. His exact admitted phrasing was telling them to fly the flag for yourself.
Fly the flag.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of the enforcer mindset and how past dominance by one team can create an intense psychological pressure cooker for the underdog.
Right.
When a group of professional athletes feels humiliated, not just losing points, but feeling physically bullied over a span of years, the frustration compounds. Eventually, the primary goal of the game shifts.
It's no longer about winning.
Exactly. It stops being about executing strategy to win the match, and it devolves into a desperate need to reclaim respect and dignity by any means necessary.
That psychological pressure cooker blew its lid almost immediately. I want to understand the play-by-play of how this erupted, because the sequence of events is just surreal.
It's intense.
We are in the first 2 minutes of the third quarter. The teams are back on the field. Hawthorn's Mark Williams kicks a goal, cutting the Essendon lead down to 26 points. What happens next? Walk me through that moment.
After a goal is scored, the ball is taken back to the middle of the field for a center bounce to restart play.
Like a tip-off in basketball.
Right, but far more chaotic, with players crashing into each other to win the ball out of the air. The ball goes down, and players are vigorously trying to gain possession in what's called a stoppage, a congested area of play.
Okay, lots of bodies.
Essendon's Mark Johnson attempts to join this stoppage, but he is forcefully, aggressively removed by a number of Hawthorn players.
This wasn't just a standard bump to clear space, was it?
Not at all. It was intensely aggressive, and it immediately led to wrestling and what are known as jumper punches.
Jumper punches.
Yeah, this is a tactic where a player grabs the thick collar or fabric of an opponent's jersey, their jumper, and uses that grip as leverage to throw short, sharp punches to the chest or face.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, you have approximately 16 giant athletes tangled up in a wrestling match right in the center square.
Unbelievable.
The television commentators noted on the broadcast that the spirit was bubbling over a little.
Bubbling over turned out to be the understatement of the decade. Let's look at the catalyst that turned this from a scuffle into a riot.
Okay.
A free kick is awarded to Hawthorn. They kick it forward, but Essendon's Mark Bolton intercepts it. Bolton clears the ball along the southern side of the ground, aiming for his teammate, Jason Winderlich. Paint a picture of what happens to Winderlich here.
In Australian rules, catching a kicked ball that has traveled over 15 meters is called taking a mark. If you take a mark, you earn a free kick and the play stops.
Got it.
But leaping into the air to catch a ball leaves a player incredibly vulnerable because their eyes are locked on the sky, not on the defenders running at them.
Yeah.
Winderlich attempts to take a mark close to the ground. As he does, Hawthorn's Chance Bateman comes charging in and delivers a devastating knock. The reports suggest it was a knee or a hip connecting directly with Winderlich's head.
A completely brutal hit.
It was. A free kick is awarded to Winderlich, but he is badly split open. He's bleeding profusely and has to be forced from the ground under the blood rule.
Which means?
The blood rule mandates that any bleeding player must leave the field immediately to receive medical attention.
And the sight of their teammate bleeding on the grass is the exact moment the match descends into total, unhinged chaos.
Complete chaos.
We aren't talking about a little push and shove anymore. The sources describe a sprawling, violent scene erupting on the Great Southern Stand side of the center square. Can you elaborate on the scale of this?
It is hard to overstate how surreal this looked on television. You have elite professional athletes abandoning the ball entirely.
Just forgetting the game.
Completely. Players are tackling each other to the turf, throwing heavy, closed-fist punches, wrestling intensely, and dragging each other by the Guernseys.
Who is starting it?
The sources specifically highlight Hawthorn's Richie Vandenberg and Lance Piccione as being particularly active aggressors in this initial explosion.
And Essendon didn't back down.
No, they were immediately met by Essendon's Adam McPhee, Mark Johnson, and Justin Murphy, who were more than eager to retaliate.
The visual of this is wild. A professional sporting event simply stopped. You have trainers whose job is to hand out water and tape ankles, rushing onto the field, desperately trying to physically drag their own massive players away from the opposition.
It reached a point of absolute absurdity. Essendon's head physiotherapist, a man named Bruce Connor, literally had to restrain his own player, Adam McPhee.
The physio was restraining the player.
Yes. Connor had to physically battle McPhee and give him marching orders off the field just to treat a bleeding gash above his eye.
But amidst all of this sprawling chaos, there is one specific incident that the sources point to as the most shocking. And it happened while Jason Winderlich, the player whose head injury sparked this whole thing, was being helped off the ground.
Yeah, this was bad.
What did Campbell Brown do?
So Winderlich is being supported by trainers. He's clearly dazed, bleeding, and defenseless, slowly making his way toward the bench.
Right.
As he's walking off, Hawthorn's Campbell Brown runs past and strikes him.
Hitting a wounded, escorted player is crossing a massive line, even in a brawl.
It sent shockwaves through the stadium. Matthew Lloyd, the star Essendon forward, would later describe Brown's strike as one of the most disgusting things I've seen on a football field.
That's a strong statement.
Very. And the Channel 10 commentators were in absolute disbelief. They were calling it the 1980s revisited. They said it was unbelievable, noting that they hadn't seen those sort of scenes for a long time in AFL football. It was a 5-minute melee that completely hijacked the sport.
So, what does this all mean for the actual match once the dust finally settled? Eventually, the umpires managed to separate the players and restore some semblance of order. But how did the two teams respond to the violence once the whistle blew to resume play?
While Hawthorn might have felt they won the physical fight, or at least proved they could fly the flag like Brereton asked, Essendon absolutely won the mental battle.
They didn't lose focus.
Not at all. They managed to regain their composure remarkably well. After the brawl, they punished Hawthorn in the most effective way possible. On the scoreboard.
Best revenge.
Exactly. They kicked 9 of the next 10 goals, extending their lead to 74 points by three-quarter time.
To channel all that adrenaline back into clinical scoring is impressive. I see here that Essendon maintained that heavy margin to win the game. They kicked 24 goals and 10 behinds.
That's right.
For our international listeners, a goal is worth 6 points, and a behind, which is when the ball misses the main post but goes through the outer posts, is worth 1 point. So Essendon scored a total of 154 points to Hawthorn's 80.
And Matthew Lloyd, the Essendon player, who was so visibly disgusted by Campbell Brown's actions, answered in the best way possible for a forward. He kicked an incredible 7-goal haul in that match.
But the final siren was really just the beginning of the story. You can't have a 16-player street fight on national television without the league stepping in.
Oh, definitely not.
The very next week, the AFL Tribunal essentially turned into a chaotic courtroom.
The tribunal is the league's judicial system for handling on-field offenses, and on the 8th and 9th of June, it was a bloodbath.
I can imagine.
A record 18 players faced a completely unprecedented 26 charges. Some were reported on the field by the umpires, others were cited by the video reports officer, and some came from a dedicated investigation by the AFL's investigations officer.
Let's look at the damage for Hawthorn first, because they took the brunt of the suspensions.
Richard Vandenberg was hit incredibly hard. He was suspended for 3 matches for striking Adam McPhee, and another 3 matches for kneeing McPhee. That's a severe 6-match suspension for one player. Lance Piccione was suspended for 4 matches for striking. Campbell Brown, for his infamous strike on the injured Winderlich, was also suspended for 4 matches.
Right.
And Simon Beaumont got 1 match for misconduct.
So that is 4 Hawthorn players suspended for a combined total of 15 matches. Did Essendon escape the tribunal entirely?
Not quite. Essendon's Justin Murphy was suspended for one match for headbutting Simon Beaumont.
Headbutting, wow.
Yeah. In total, across both teams, 5 players were suspended for 16 matches. But the financial penalty is what really highlights the sheer scale of the league's anger. Players involved in the melee were fined a combined total of $70,700.
$70,700. That was the highest amount distributed from a single match in the history of the sport.
The tribunal chairman didn't mince his words either. He stated that the brawl brought football into disrepute. The AFL was sending a very clear, very expensive message that this sort of 1980s-style street fight had no place in the modern professional game.
The immediate aftermath is severe. I'm looking at the stats for the rest of that year, and the 2004 season is effectively ruined for both teams.
Yeah.
Hawthorn only won 4 games the entire year. They barely avoided the wooden spoon, which is the dreaded unofficial title given to the team that finishes dead last.
And nobody wants that.
No. They only avoided it by having a slightly better percentage than the Richmond Tigers, meaning their ratio of points scored versus points allowed was just fractionally less terrible.
And while Essendon won the match and finished much higher on the ladder, the brawl didn't propel them to glory either. They seemed to lose their momentum entirely.
Did they?
Yeah, they only won 4 more matches in the regular season. They limped into the playoffs in 8th place and were knocked out by Geelong in the second week.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You would think that this match cemented Essendon's dominance and Hawthorn's misery for the foreseeable future.
You'd think so.
But the ultimate irony of the line in the sand match is that it marks the exact point where the fortunes of these two clubs completely flipped.
Tell me about this role reversal.
It is a stunning shift in momentum. Let's look at Essendon first. Following the 2004 season, they plummeted down the ladder. In 2005, they dropped to 13th place, missing the playoffs for the first time since 1997.
Wow.
In fact, they wouldn't win another final series for years, and they went on a miserable losing streak against Hawthorn from 2005 all the way to 2009.
Wait, so Hawthorn goes from being battered physically and on the scoreboard, finishing second to last, to suddenly dominating the rivalry.
Yes.
How did they turn that rock-bottom moment around?
They used the embarrassment of 2004 as a foundation to completely rebuild their culture. They hired a new, visionary coach named Alistair Clarkson. Under Clarkson, they started a steady climb.
Okay.
They reached the semifinals in 2007, won the premiership in 2008, and then launched a historic dynasty, winning 3 consecutive premierships in 2013, 2014, and 2015. That is staggering. But the rivalry itself wasn't dead, was it? It was just lying dormant, waiting for another spark.
Just waiting.
And that spark came half a decade later. Round 22, 2009. Both teams are battling for 8th place on the ladder, desperate to make the playoffs. And we get the violent sequel to 2004. Set the scene for me.
Essendon's captain at this time is Matthew Lloyd.
The same Matthew Lloyd.
The exact same Matthew Lloyd, who was so disgusted by Hawthorn's violence 5 years prior. During this 2009 game, Lloyd had received a vicious halftime spray from his coach, which is essentially a locker room dressing down where the coach screams at the players for poor performance.
Okay, so he's fired up.
Very. Lloyd wanted to make a statement against Hawthorn, who were the reigning 2008 premiers.
So the roles are totally reversed. Hawthorn are the champions. Essendon are the frustrated team trying to prove themselves.
Exactly. At the start of the third quarter, Lloyd runs off the line and delivers a brutal head-high shirt front to Hawthorn midfielder Brad Sewell. A shirt front is an incredibly aggressive, front-on physical bump. It's a massive hit, it knocks Sewell out cold, and it instantly sparks another sprawling brawl between the two teams.
History repeating itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how deeply sports grudges embed themselves in a club's DNA, holding over years, just waiting for the right moment to ignite. But the true poetic irony of this 2009 rematch comes from the press conferences afterward.
I love this part. Campbell Brown, the Hawthorn player, who Lloyd publicly called disgusting back in 2004 for hitting a wounded player, took full advantage of the role reversal.
He really did.
After the 2009 brawl, Brown gets in front of the microphones and publicly declares that Matthew Lloyd is one of the biggest snipers in the sport. It is an absolute masterclass in holding a grudge.
The symmetry is incredible. In 2004, Essendon was the dominant force. Hawthorn lashed out aggressively, and Lloyd condemned them.
Yep.
5 years later, Hawthorn is the dominant reigning premier. Essendon is struggling. Lloyd lashes out aggressively, and Brown condemns him. It is a perfect closed loop of sports rivalry.
It really is. So, to quickly wrap up this incredible journey for you, We started with a deeply rooted 1980s rivalry that led to a frustrated locker room speech in 2004.
That's right.
That instruction to fly the flag ignited a historic, terrifying 5-minute brawl at the MCG. It resulted in unprecedented tribunal charges, colossal financial fines, and ultimately a complete decade-long reversal of fortunes for both the Hawthorn and Essendon football clubs.
This raises an important question, one that extends far beyond just Australian rules football. We see here the extreme, dangerous tension between maintaining professional discipline and unleashing raw aggression in a team environment.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on today. Does hitting rock bottom in such a public, undisciplined, and violent way actually serve as the necessary catalyst for true cultural reform within an organization?
It's a great point.
Hawthorn embarrassed themselves on a national stage in 2004. They were fined, suspended, and ridiculed. But that very embarrassment forced them to look in the mirror, paving the way for a coaching change and one of the greatest modern dynasties in the sport. Is total undeniable organizational failure sometimes the only way to truly wipe the slate clean and build a champion?
It's a fascinating paradox to consider. The worst, most shameful moment in a club's modern history might just be the exact foundation of their greatest success.
Something to think about the next time you see a team, or even a company, completely implode under pressure. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the line in the sand match. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we will catch you next time for another deep dive.